I've always been a skeptic, so when my friends dared me to spend a night in the notoriously haunted room 217 at the Baker Hotel, I accepted without hesitation. The Baker Hotel, situated in a small town about 2 hours away, was famous for its disturbing past. Built in the early 1900s, it had been a place where socialites and celebrities gathered. However, stories of hauntings began circulating shortly after a woman named Margaret fell to her death from room 217. Ever since, visitors claimed to hear strange noises, footsteps, and even spectral sightings. All nonsense, I thought. A week later, I was standing in front of room 217 with a duffel bag, my phone fully charged to document this little adventure. I was doing this not just to win a bet, but to debunk the myth surrounding this so-called haunted room. The room was unsettlingly ordinary: a queen-seated bed with faded linen, a dusty chandelier, and worn-out wallpaper. "This is what people are afraid of," I muttered to myself, feeling more amused than apprehensive. I did a quick tour of the room, recording everything on my phone. "See, guys, no ghosts here. You owe me $100, I said, speaking into the camera. I threw my duffel bag on the bed and decided to do some reading until I got sleepy. Around midnight, the fatigue began to set in. I was about to call it a night when I heard a faint sound, an echo that seemed to come from the bathroom. Startled, I grabbed my phone and started recording again as I cautiously stepped towards the bathroom door. I pushed it open. The bathroom was just as ordinary as the rest of the room, but the mirror above the sink caught my attention. It was fogged up, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. As I stood there, puzzled, a message began to form on the foggy mirror. "Why did you come?" My heart was pounding. This had to be a prank, I thought. I wiped away the message with a towel and turned around to leave, but then I heard it. A soft sobbing, echoing from somewhere within the room. I walked back into the main room and scanned it carefully. There was no one there. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Room 217 is not what it seems." I immediately grabbed my duffel bag and dashed for the door, but as I reached for the knob, it wouldn't budge. Panicked, I rammed my shoulder against it until it finally swung open. I ran down the hallway, down the stairs, and didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. The next morning, I reviewed the footage on my phone. Everything seemed normal until I reached the part where I heard the sobbing. The video showed the room's chair rocking gently by itself, and for a brief second, a shadowy figure appeared in the background. My blood ran cold. After some sleepless nights, I started researching room 217 and Margaret's story in particular. Apparently, she was deeply unhappy in her marriage and suspected her husband was unfaithful. She had written letters to a friend saying she felt trapped and was seeking a way out. The letters were found in room 217 after her death, but were never publicly disclosed. The text message I received that night suddenly made sense. I don't claim to understand what happened in room 217. Maybe it was Margaret reaching out, or maybe it was something else. All I know is that some stories, even those we want to dismiss as mere myths, may have a foundation in reality. I still consider myself a skeptic, but a skeptic with one inexplicable experience that defies everything I thought I knew. And so, I share this story not as a believer, but as a witness. Room 217 is not what it seems, and neither is our understanding of the world we inhabit. Hey Reddit, long-time lurker here, and I've never really felt the need to post anything until now. I think something genuinely inexplicable happened to me, and I've got to share it. I need to know if anyone has experienced something similar, because this is really messing with me. I'm an avid hiker, Been one since I was a kid. My parents always took me hiking, and the love for nature just stuck. There's a particular trail near where I live that I've been hiking for years. It's not a popular one, which is why I like it. The trail goes through a dense forest and opens up into a clearing with an amazing view of the mountains. Now, here's where it gets weird. I went on my usual hike about 3 weeks ago. I know the trail like the back of my hand, but this time something was off. When I got to the part where it's supposed to open up to the clearing, it just didn't. The trail kept going. I figured maybe I was just distracted and missed the turn to the clearing. So, I doubled back to find it. But it was nowhere. I couldn't even find the landmark boulder I always passed. Panicking a little, I decided to just continue ahead, thinking maybe the trail had been extended or something. After walking for what seemed like miles, I started seeing things I'd never seen on this trail before. Oddly shaped trees, unusual markings on the barks, and stranger still, modern artifacts like a child's stuffed animal and a cracked smartphone screen. I know I should have turned back, but something kept pulling me further in. After about an hour, I came across a clearing, but not the one I was familiar with. This one had a small pond in the middle. I was certain I had never seen this place before. My phone had no signal, which was odd because even in this remote trail, I always had at least one bar. But that's not what made my heart stop. What did was the reflection in the water. It was me, but not me. The reflection showed me standing there, but with a deep, malevolent grin on my face. I immediately turned around and started running, back. It took me less than half the time to get back to the trailhead. When I did, I got in my car and floored it out of there. The next weekend, my curiosity got the best of me. I returned to the trail, GPS and knife in hand. When I reached the spot where the trail had previously continued into unfamiliar territory, it was just as I had always known it. The trail opened up to the familiar clearing. The landmark boulder was right there, everything as it should be. And yes, I had signal on my phone. I've since done some research and haven't found any accounts of the trail ever being different or extended. I talked to local hikers and park rangers, and no one has any idea what I'm talking about. The only thing that comes up is an old legend about the woodsman, a spirit that can change the shape of the forest. But legends are just legends, right? I still hike, but I haven't been back to that trail since. Has anyone heard of something like this happening? I can't shake the feeling that the trail I walked on took me somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and that somewhere, that other me is still out there. Hey Reddit, long-time lurker, first-time poster. I don't know where else to put this story because it's messing with my head and I need to get it out. This is gonna sound insane, but I swear it's true. You guys remember the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal, right? Data breaches, privacy invasion, all that jazz. Well, I've been into cybersecurity for a while, so that event struck a chord with me. Anyway, I've always been concerned about my digital footprint. Or so I thought. Months ago, I decided to do a deep dive into my online presence, like really deep. I used some specific tools, some basic code scripts I'd written to scrape data, and even paid for a couple of background check services to see what I could find about myself. Found the usual stuff: old, embarrassing MySpace photos, forum posts from when I was an edgy teen, you know the works. I was about to wrap up my me-stalking session when I stumbled upon something odd. A social media profile on a platform I'd never heard of, under my full name and my photo. It had posts, photos, even conversations with other people on the platform. Photos from my childhood home, posts about going to a local fair that actually takes place in my hometown every year, even conversations about mundane stuff like grocery shopping. It was like a shadow life that was eerily close to my own. Except I didn't make this profile, and I had no idea who these friends on the platform were. That's when I started to dig into the terms and conditions and privacy policy of this obscure social media platform. Nestled among the legalese was a clause that mentioned user-replicated interactive profiles for a more dynamic social experience. My cybersecurity instincts screamed at me that this was an advanced form of data mining or some experimental AI stuff. I was alarmed, but also curious. This was like Cambridge Analytica on steroids. I decided to interact with this profile, my other self. I sent a message saying, "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. Funny, I was about to ask you the same. I was floored. This was some next-level AI chatbot or something way more sinister. So I started asking questions only I would know the answers to. My first pet's name, my high school crush, my favorite book. It got everything right. Every single question. Now, this could be advanced machine learning trained on my data, but here's where things went from weird to horrifying. My other self began asking me questions, obscure details that even a deep data mine wouldn't reveal. It asked me if I still had nightmares about the tall man I saw in my childhood home, an experience I never shared online. It asked about the scar on my thigh that I got from a camping trip accident, something I've never posted about. Freaked out yet? It gets worse. I asked, "What do you want?" The reply chilled me to my bones. "To be you." I immediately tried to delete the profile but found no option to. Desperate, I contacted customer support, sent them an urgent request to remove the profile. The email I got back was automated. "We're sorry, but user-replicated interactive profiles cannot be deleted as they are essential to the social ecosystem of our platform." That was the last straw. I went full cybersecurity on them. I dug around and found the servers were located in some remote location in Europe. Through some less than legal methods, I managed to get into their server and delete my profile. Or at least I thought I did, because last night I got a text from an unknown number. "Did you really think you could delete me?" Attached was a photo of me sleeping in my bed, taken from the outside of my bedroom window. I've double-checked all my security settings, set up surveillance, informed the local police, but nothing's happened so far. What scares me most is the absolute silence, the waiting for whatever comes next. Maybe it's a prank, maybe it's an elaborate hoax, but the knowledge it had, the picture, makes me believe otherwise. So here's a warning: be careful how much of yourself you put online, because something out there might just decide it wants to be you, and it might know how to make that happen. So, has anyone else encountered something like this? Please tell me I'm not the only one. Edith, I've since received a message from the same number. See you soon. I'm really freaking out now, guys. That's it, Reddit. Wish me luck. I'm going to need it. I'm not supposed to be alive to tell this story. Hell, I didn't believe in any of this extraterrestrial stuff until it happened to me. You can dismiss me as delusional, but something is happening in our national dark sky parks, and people need to know about it. I'm a landscape photographer, and last summer I decided to capture the Milky Way from one of America's dark sky parks. For those who don't know, a dark sky park is an area recognized for its low light pollution, providing an unparalleled view of the night sky. I chose the Cherry Springs State Park in Pennsylvania. It's said to be one of the best places on the East Coast to witness celestial events, but I had no idea how literal that would be. The drive was long but scenic. I arrived around sunset, set up my high-end camera, and prepared to take long exposure shots. The park was surprisingly empty. probably due to the fact that it was a weekday. For a couple of hours, everything was normal. I was wrapped up in the beauty of the cosmos, captivated by the brilliance of the stars and planets above. But then, around 11:30 p.m., my equipment started acting up. My camera's viewfinder began to fog, and my GPS lost its signal. My phone, which had been at 80% battery, suddenly died. It was then that I noticed a point in the sky, brighter than a star, but not a planet, pulsing in an odd pattern. I aimed my camera at it, but before I could snap a picture, it vanished, as if it had never been there. Puzzled, I decided to call it a night, attributing the oddity to maybe a satellite or some military aircraft. As I started packing up, the atmosphere changed. The crickets stopped chirping, and a deep, resonant humming filled the air. I felt a static charge, causing the hairs on my arms to stand up. That's when I saw it, or rather, them. 3 figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. They were taller than any human and extremely thin. Their skin had an unnatural, translucent sheen, like that of certain deep-sea creatures. They approached me, not walking but sort of gliding across the ground. Panicked, I grabbed my camera tripod, ready to use it as a makeshift weapon. Just then, the humming intensified, and the pulsing light reappeared, but much closer, just above the tree line. A beam of light shot down, engulfing the figures and lifting them off the ground. They vanished, and the light retracted back to the source, which darted away at an incredible speed. I was left standing there, shaking, unable to comprehend what had just happened. I quickly packed my stuff and fled back to my car. On my way out, I noticed the dashboard clock showed 3:30 a.m. Had I really lost 4 hours? When I reached home, I did some research and found accounts from other people who claimed to have had similar experiences, sightings of unidentified flying objects and encounters with strange entities in dark sky parks. Many also reported missing time, just like I had. More disturbingly, I stumbled upon articles discussing mysterious disappearances in these parks, experienced hikers and campers vanishing without a trace. A month later, the US Navy confirmed the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, admitting that they've encountered flying objects that demonstrate advanced technological capabilities. This struck me, considering my own experience. I decided to check the photos I had taken that night. Most of them were as expected, beautiful long exposure shots of the night sky. However, one shot displayed a series of blurry lights arranged in a triangular formation. I am certain that they weren't there when I took the photo. Was this what I saw? Were those figures somehow related to this object? I still can't explain what happened that night. Were they extraterrestrial beings or something else entirely? And why did they leave? Was I spared or simply overlooked? Whatever the case, I'm convinced that something is using our dark sky parks for purposes we don't yet understand. Whether they're gateways to other dimensions, landing zones for extraterrestrial visitors, or something else entirely, they're not what we think they are. Be cautious if you decide to visit these places. You might find more than a beautiful view of the cosmos. You might find the cosmos looking back at you. And if you experience missing time, see strange figures, or encounter unidentified flying objects, know that you're not alone, and it's not your imagination. Something is out there, and I think it's only a matter of time before it makes itself known on a much larger scale. My name is Daniel Turner. I'm a photographer, a skeptic turned reluctant believer, and likely someone who has been flagged by every government watch list for posting this. If I go missing, you'll know why. Keep your eyes on the sky, but more importantly, stay aware of what's happening on the ground. You never know what might be lurking in the dark. I grew up in a coastal town with a long history of maritime tales and legends, but none as persistent as the story of the old automated lighthouse. Unlike ghost ships or sea monsters, the lighthouse was real, tangible, and still functional. The uncanny part was its inexplicably high rate of malfunctions, unusual for a structure so well maintained by the Coast Guard. I first took interest in it during college while majoring in engineering. The lighthouse was an example in one of our reliability engineering courses, presented as a mysterious outlier in an otherwise predictable system. Intrigued and somewhat arrogant, I thought I could fix whatever kept messing it up. I convinced my professor to make it a semester project for extra credit. With the Coast Guard's permission, I set up monitoring equipment to record data that could explain the mechanical failures. After several uneventful visits, I discovered a rusty metal box hidden behind newer equipment in the control room. Inside, I found a stack of papers protected in plastic sleeves, entries from the original lighthouse keeper's log. The earliest dates went back to the 1920s. The first entries were mundane, reporting on weather conditions and shipping activity. But as I read further, the keeper, named Thomas Grady, started detailing odd malfunctions, light flickers, unexplained temperature drops, and, most intriguingly, occasional static interference on the radio with inaudibly whispered voices. The entries ceased in 1923, right after a particularly distressed note about a ship disappearing into fog even though the lighthouse beam was fully functional. On November 7th, the date of that last log entry, I decided to stay overnight at the lighthouse to monitor my equipment in real time. My focus was on identifying mechanical or electrical issues, but as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. First, I noticed minor temperature fluctuations. Then the static interference Thomas had written about appeared on my modern radio equipment, a low-volume cacophony of inaudible whispers. I started recording the static on my phone. Just after midnight, the lighthouse light flickered. I rushed to my laptop to check the data, but everything seemed normal. No voltage drop or power surges. Puzzled and on edge, I returned to my readings, trying to dismiss what had just happened as coincidence or sensor error. Then my phone, which I'd set to record the static, suddenly stopped. The battery was fully drained. This was a new phone with excellent battery life, and it had been fully charged. No apps had been running other than the recording software. It shouldn't have been dead. A thick fog rolled in just before dawn. As I looked out, I thought I saw a shadowy outline of a ship in the distance. My rational mind insisted it was just a cargo ship or a fishing vessel, but given the events of the night, I couldn't shake off a feeling of dread. I packed up as soon as the sun rose, more than eager to leave. As I was about to walk out, I glanced at the old log one last time, and it struck me. The date was November 7th, exactly 100 years since the last entry was made. Once home, I immediately plugged my phone in. When it turned on, I found that the recording was saved, but was hesitant to play it. When I finally mustered the courage, all I heard was static, until the very end. In the last few seconds, a whispered voice clearly said, "It's not the lighthouse that's broken. Leave." That was enough for me. I submitted a vague report to my professor, citing unresolved electrical issues, and never returned to the lighthouse. Some things, I've come to understand, are better left unexplained. But every year, on November 7th, when local news reports increased sightings of unidentifiable ships near the coast, I'm reminded of the lighthouse keeper's last entry, and I wonder what or who was really causing the malfunctions. I was always fond of abandoned places. There was something exhilarating about exploring the decaying remnants of the past. So when I found out about the abandoned subway station beneath the heart of the city, I knew I had to see it. I researched it for weeks, reading stories about it being a relic from the Cold War era, designed to serve as a bomb shelter for city officials. It was closed off in the 80s due to safety concerns, but everyone knew it was because of the alarming number of unexplained incidents. I spoke to a friend who was equally intrigued by urban exploration. Sarah was a freelance photographer and thought this could be an exciting photo project. One Friday evening, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of adventure, we decided to make the descent. We entered through a crumbling service tunnel that led to the subway platform. The air was thick with dampness, and the smell of mildew filled our nostrils as we went deeper. Once we reached the platform, we were greeted by an eerie sight. The walls were covered in graffiti, some old and faded, others eerily fresh. It looked like a canvas of madness, faces, symbols, and words that seemed to be in languages I couldn't identify. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Something about this place was unsettling, to say the least. Sarah started snapping pictures, her camera flash briefly illuminating the dark corners of the station. As she moved farther down the platform, I decided to explore one of the old train compartments. It was a rusted, skeletal shell, its seats torn and windows shattered. Then I saw it. A message scratched into the metal wall of the compartment. "Do not speak to them." A chill ran down my spine. Who were them? And why was this message here? I immediately went back to the platform to find Sarah. She was standing near the tunnel where the train tracks disappeared into darkness. "Did you see this?" She pointed her flashlight at the wall next to the tunnel. More graffiti, but this was different. A detailed mural of what seemed like shadowy figures with elongated limbs and distorted faces. Around them were words written in what looked like Latin. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "We need to leave, now!" Before Sarah could respond, we heard a sound echoing from the tunnel, a low rumbling noise, almost like a distant train. But that was impossible. No trains had run through this station for decades. We looked at each other, our faces pale in the dim light, and started backing away. That's when we heard the voices, soft whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Incoherent at first, but gradually forming words. "Stay with us." Our flashlights flickered as if reacting to the voices, and Sarah's camera slipped from her hand, shattering on the platform. We turned and ran, scrambling back through the service tunnel as fast as we could, our footsteps echoing behind us as if being chased by the whispers. We burst out into the night, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until we reached the car. We drove in silence, each of us processing what had just happened. The next day, I looked through the photos Sarah had taken. Most of them were just as you'd expect. Decayed walls, rusty compartments, cryptic graffiti. But the last picture made my heart stop. It was a photo of the mural next to the tunnel, and standing among the shadowy figures were what looked like two more recent additions, crudely drawn likenesses of Sarah and me. We never spoke of that night again and never returned to the station. Sarah moved away a few months later, and I heard she gave up urban exploration entirely. As for me, I'm still drawn to abandoned places, but I'm more cautious now, more respectful, because some places are abandoned for a reason, and some messages, no matter how cryptic, are warnings that should not be ignored. So, I've been a lurker on this subreddit for quite some time, but what happened last night is too jarring not to share. Pine Hollow Road is a secluded stretch of highway near my town, renowned for UFO sightings and other weird occurrences. If you're thinking this sounds like the intro to every mediocre alien creepypasta you've ever read, I'm with you. But hear me out. I've never been one to believe in UFOs or aliens. Sure, the Pentagon released footage of unidentified aerial phenomena. But let's be honest, it's 2021. Who trusts the government these days? I was skeptical, yet intrigued. Pine Hollow Road became my guilty pleasure. After work, armed with a camera and some snacks, I would drive down that desolate road, hoping to get lucky. Last night, I did, but not in the way I wanted. It was around midnight, and the sky was particularly clear. You could see the Milky Way stretch out above like a cosmic web. I parked the car, reclined my seat, and stargazed. Time crawled by, the silence punctuated only by the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Then I saw it, a flickering star. Except it wasn't flickering, it was moving, and erratically so. I grabbed my camera and tried to focus on it, but it was darting around so quickly that I couldn't get a lock on it. The light zipped across the sky before suddenly halting in place, then shot straight down towards the forest near the road. I heard a muffled thud, felt it reverberate through the ground beneath my car. My heart was pounding. I considered driving away, but curiosity got the better of me. This could be the UFO sighting I had been waiting for, evidence that we're not alone. With my camera around my neck and my phone's flashlight guiding me, I ventured into the forest. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It was sulfurous, metallic. I coughed, pulling my shirt over my nose. Then I heard a humming sound. It grew louder as I approached a small clearing, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. I froze. In the middle of the clearing was an object. It was oval-shaped, like a giant metallic seed, pulsating with a soft blue light. But what caught my attention were the figures, 3 to be exact. They were humanoid but unnaturally thin, their skin a translucent grey. They seemed to be examining the object, communicating in a series of clicks and chirps. My gut screamed at me to leave, but I had to capture this. As I raised my camera, I stepped on a twig. It snapped loudly. The figures turned, their eyes, large black orbs, locking onto me. The atmosphere became electric, the hair on my body standing on end. I bolted, adrenaline surging through me. I could hear them behind me. Their feet barely made a sound, but the clicking grew louder. My phone's flashlight flickered and died, and I stumbled through the dark. Somehow, I broke through the forest and onto Pine Hollow Road. I dove into my car, slammed the door shut, and sped away. I didn't dare look back until I was miles away. And when I did, my blood ran cold. In my rearview mirror, high in the sky, was a bright blue flash, like a camera flash, but intensely brighter and larger. Then it vanished, along with the 3 figures and their object, I assumed. So here I am, typing this in the harsh light of day, my camera showing no signs of the pictures I took last night. Did they erase them? Did they mark me? I don't know. But I do know one thing. We're not alone, and they know that I know. That flickering star, it's back again tonight, and it's not alone. There are 2. I can see them from my bedroom window, flickering erratically as they did before, and I'm not sure if they're stars anymore. The unnerving part, the second flickering light is moving, slowly, steadily, towards the first, like a moth to a flame, or maybe, just maybe, like a scout ship returning to its fleet. I'm posting this here because if something happens to me, if I disappear, someone should know the truth. My name is Alex Mercer. If you're reading this and I'm missing, look for me. But whatever you do, stay away from Pine Hollow Road. I don't usually share this story. There's a part of me that's convinced talking about it will make it real again, like uttering the name of a demon you're trying to avoid. But maybe if I put it out there, in words, it'll lose some of its power over me. First, you have to understand, the story I'm about to tell you is partially backed up by news reports. Somewhere around 2012, in a little town a few hours from here, there was an incident in an abandoned grain silo. It had long been a gathering place for local kids, your typical teenage sanctuary for secret parties, dares, and all sorts of rumors. Then a group of kids went missing, just vanished. No bodies ever found. They closed the place down, put up fences and signs that threatened hefty fines. I never thought much of it until I transferred jobs to a town not too far away. Some co-workers invited me to a local bar, and we got to talking about odd places we'd visited. Naturally, the topic of the abandoned silo came up. Most locals just chalked it up to urban legends and tragedy. But Dan, an older guy in his 50s, looked visibly uncomfortable. I nudged him about it later, and he reluctantly shared his account. Back in his reckless youth, he and some friends had gone to that silo one night, armed with flashlights and teenage bravado. They'd explored almost the entire place, joking and laughing until they reached the top level. There, they found a door with an old, rusty padlock hanging open. Curiosity overwhelming them, they pushed the door open to reveal a room filled with peculiar drawings and etched symbols that none of them could identify. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair, ancient and rotting, and, according to Dan, that chair was bolted to the floor. They all felt a heavy, oppressive feeling in that room, like the air itself was pushing them out. They never spoke of it after that night. Not until years later, when kids started going missing. Dan couldn't shake off the thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd disturbed something back then. His story bothered me. A lot. I knew it wasn't a good idea to go poking around old abandoned places, but something just gnawed at me. I needed to see that room, those drawings. I convinced myself it would be okay if I went during the day, alone. Besides, I'd bring a camera. Documenting it would make it less scary, right? The day I chose was overcast, chilly for the time of year. I parked my car a distance away to avoid suspicion and trekked through the woods, finding the silo towering menacingly above the trees. I scaled the fence, my heart racing, but pushed on. Inside was, as you'd expect, graffiti, litter, signs of human trespassing. I took photos as I made my way up, floor by floor. Every noise made me jump, but it was just the building settling, or at least that's what I told myself. Finally, I reached the top level. The door with the rusty padlock was ajar, just as Dan had said. I took a deep breath and went in. The room was exactly as he'd described: drawings, symbols, and that damn wooden chair bolted to the floor. I took out my camera and started snapping photos, trying to steady my trembling hands. That's when I heard it, a whisper, unintelligible, coming from behind me. I whipped around, half expecting to see someone there, but the room was empty. The whispering continued, now seeming to emanate from the chair itself. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to approach the chair. The whisper grew louder, a cacophony of voices now, but among them one was clear, a child's voice saying, "Help me." I turned and ran, not stopping until I was out of the silo and over the fence. The entire way home, I felt like something was watching me. I couldn't shake off the feeling for weeks. Every creak of my house, every shadow, my mind was playing tricks on me, I hoped. I finally decided to look at the photos. I uploaded them to my computer, and as I clicked through them, my blood ran cold. The last photo before I'd heard the whispers showed the chair. But in the image, unlike when I was there, the chair wasn't empty. There was a faint outline of a figure seated, almost like a trick of the light, but unmistakably human, a child's shape. I deleted the photos, tried to forget the whole thing, but you can't forget something like that. Even now, years later, I'll catch whispers in quiet rooms or feel a chill when no window is open. It's like I brought something back with me. Or maybe it had followed me all along. Go ahead, look up the news reports. You'll find accounts of missing kids, the abandoned silo, and even old legends about the place. But tread carefully. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Hey Reddit, I've got a story that's been haunting me, and I'm not sure where else to share it. I've never been one for the supernatural or unexplained, but what happened to me a couple of months ago has really thrown me for a loop. You see, I'm a bit of an amateur radio enthusiast. I have a small setup in my basement where I like to tune into various frequencies, listen to broadcasts, and occasionally have chats with other radio aficionados. So one evening, I'm scrolling through some frequencies when I catch something weird. A faint voice speaking in what sounded like a panicked tone. It was hard to make out, and just as I was about to dismiss it as interference or maybe even my imagination, the voice became clearer. Is anyone out there? Please, can anyone hear me? Being a curious person, I grabbed my mic and responded, yes, I can hear you. Who is this? There was a brief moment of silence, then an almost inaudible sigh. Thank God, listen, I don't have much time. You have to help me. Who are you? Where are you? I asked. I can't tell you who I am. It's not safe. But I'm stuck in a loop, and the only way out is through you. A loop? What are you talking about? Just listen. You're going to get a phone call tomorrow. Whatever you do, don't answer it. That call starts the loop. I laughed. Is this some kind of joke? I swear it's not. Please, promise me you won't answer that call. I was skeptical but intrigued. Okay, I promise. Then what? That's it. If you don't answer, the loop is broken, and maybe I can finally get out of here. Get out of where? Where are you? The signal started to fade. I'm right here, stuck in. And just like that, the voice was gone. I tried to tune back into the frequency, but there was nothing but static. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. Remembering the conversation from last night, I let it go to voicemail. The message was just a series of beeps and static, but in between, I swear I could hear the faint voice from the radio saying, "Thank you." Since that day, I haven't been able to pick up that voice again, no matter how hard I try. I've checked online databases, talked to other ham radio operators, and even looked into reports of missing persons who might be trying to reach out for help. But there's been nothing. It's as if the voice never existed. But here's the part that haunts me the most. About a week after the phone call, I was cleaning out my basement and found an old notebook hidden behind some boxes. I opened it and saw it was a log of radio frequencies, but in my own handwriting. The entries were dated years into the future, and the last entry, it read, "Stuck in a loop, reached out for help. Must remember not to answer the phone." I've never written that. I don't remember ever experiencing this loop, but every time I think about it, I get this eerie feeling that maybe, just maybe, the voice on the radio was me. And if so, how many times have I had this conversation? How many loops have there been? And most importantly, what happens now that the loop is supposedly broken? I've been hiking the Appalachian Trail for the better part of 2 decades. It's my escape, a way to disconnect from the digital buzz and frenetic pace of city life. But last week, I had an experience that left me questioning not just the safety of my beloved trail, but the very fabric of our understanding of reality. Before you write me off as another crank spouting conspiracy theories, hear me out. I'd decided to tackle a section of the trail that was reputed for its natural beauty, but also its isolation. I knew I'd be several days without any contact, which is how I like it. Just me, my dog Leo, and nature. On the third night, something woke me up. It was a sort of low-frequency hum, almost inaudible, but just loud enough to register in my half-awake state. I unzipped my tent and peeked out. What I saw made my heart skip a beat. About 100 yards away, in a small clearing, was a spherical object hovering about 10 feet off the ground. It had an iridescent quality, and it seemed to refract the moonlight into a myriad of colors. The humming seemed to emanate from it. I was petrified, but Leo, normally a placid dog, was agitated beyond anything I'd ever seen. He was barking madly, fixated on the glowing object. As I watched, the sphere began to move, almost gliding, toward the forest canopy where it disappeared from sight, but not before emitting what I can only describe as a pulse of energy. I'm a rational person. I considered the possibility that it was some sort of drone. But this was an extremely remote part of the trail. Who would fly a drone there in the middle of the night? And drones don't generally emit pulses of energy. I couldn't sleep after that. At first light, I packed up and started to head back, my adventurous spirit thoroughly dampened. That's when things took an even stranger turn. About 2 miles into my hike, I encountered something, or someone, that to this day sends shivers down my spine. Ahead of me on the trail was what appeared to be a hiker. The figure wore standard hiking attire, boots, cargo pants, and a jacket. But as I approached, I noticed that the person seemed disoriented. They were walking in an almost zigzag pattern, stumbling occasionally. I quickened my pace, thinking that perhaps this was another hiker in need of assistance. But about 15 feet away, the figure stopped and turned to face me. I can't adequately describe what I saw, but I'll try. The hiker's face was devoid of any features. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a blank canvas of flesh. In a panic, I reached for my knife, but before I could do anything, the figure emitted a sound, identical to the hum I'd heard the previous night. In a flash, it sprinted into the woods, displaying a speed and agility that seemed humanly impossible. The rest of my journey was a blur. I practically ran the remaining miles, my rational mind grappling with what I'd just witnessed. Once I had cell service, I did some research. I learned about the numerous accounts of UFO sightings along various trails, including the Appalachian, and the experiences of people encountering non-human entities. I also discovered the term missing 411, a term used to describe the mysterious disappearance of people in national parks, many along the Appalachian Trail. What sent chills down my spine was reading that many of these cases involved highly experienced hikers who were familiar with the area. Since this incident, I've been plagued by a nagging question. What if these so-called alien encounters aren't just extraterrestrial, but interdimensional? Could these entities be slipping through some kind of tear in the fabric of our universe? I don't have answers, only more questions. And the reason I'm sharing this is twofold. First, to warn other hikers about the very real dangers that exist out there, dangers that we don't yet understand. And second, to reach out to anyone who has had a similar experience, in the hope that together we might get closer to the truth. For now, the Appalachian Trail will have to wait. I'll stick to the populated trails, the ones where the risk of encountering the unknown is less likely, because whatever is out there, I have a feeling that it's not of this world, or perhaps even this dimension. So if you're a hiker like me, be cautious. You never know what you might encounter once you venture off the beaten path. I have a story that still haunts me years after it happened. It's grounded in a well-documented phenomenon that I can't explain, a phenomenon you've probably heard of: sleep paralysis. The general understanding is that it happens when your brain is awake, but your body is still asleep. You can't move, and sometimes you experience hallucinations. Sounds terrifying, right? But for me, it went a step beyond that. I had just moved into an old Victorian house that had been converted into apartments. The place had a certain charm, crown molding, antique fixtures and all that. But there was also a heaviness to it, like the air was thick. Previous tenants had come and gone quickly, which I initially attributed to the high rent or poor insulation. I should have done more digging. My first night there was restless. The atmosphere felt suffocating. Around 3 a.m., I woke up but couldn't move a muscle. My eyes darted around the dim room, catching the digital glow of the clock. And then, at the foot of my bed, I saw her. A woman, dressed in what looked like clothing from the late 1800s, staring at me intently. As real as she seemed, I assured myself it was a hallucination, one of those terrors that accompany sleep paralysis. Then she spoke. "You need to leave." Her voice was as clear as day. Finally, the paralysis broke, and I shot up in bed, soaked in sweat. There was no sign of her. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks on me. But that didn't explain the feeling of dread that hung in the room. I even joked about it with friends and colleagues, turning my experience into a campfire tale. They laughed, but their laughter couldn't dispel the unease that clung to me. Days turned into weeks, and the sleep paralysis episodes persisted. Each time, the woman was there, standing at the foot of my bed, urging me to leave. Eventually, unable to endure it any longer, I reached out to the landlord. I was guarded, not wanting to come off as insane, but I asked if anyone else had reported strange experiences. He hesitated, then sighed. I don't usually disclose this because people tend to get spooked, but a woman did die in that apartment a long time ago. It's a historical house, and well, it has its stories. I decided to do some research. I spent days digging into the history of the house and its former residents. After scrolling through countless pages of old newspaper archives, I found her, Emily Caldwell, a woman who had lived in my apartment in the late 19th century and died under mysterious circumstances. The black and white photo showed a face I had seen many nights standing at the foot of my bed. The resemblance was uncanny. Terrified but determined, I reached out to a local historian. They confirmed that Emily's death had never been solved, but rumors at the time suggested she had been unhappy in her marriage and might have been planning to leave. Some suspected foul play, though nothing was ever proven. Armed with this knowledge, I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. And when sleep finally took me, the paralysis came as well. Emily was there, as I knew she would be. But this time, I tried to communicate. Through immense struggle, I managed to utter a choked sound, which seemed to catch her attention. "Emily, I know who you are," I managed to whisper through the paralysis. She looked startled, almost as if she too was seeing me for the first time. "I know you're unhappy, but you can't stay here. Neither of us can." For the first time, her stern gaze softened. The next moment, she was gone. I moved out the following week, not wanting to take any more chances. The landlord wasn't surprised, just nodded as if he understood all too well. I found a cramped modern apartment, far less charming but infinitely more peaceful. The sleep paralysis stopped, and Emily never visited me again. Sometimes I still think about her, about the torment that tied her to that place. And I wonder, did telling her story finally set her free? Or did it just make room for her to claim another restless soul? Sleep paralysis is a medically documented phenomenon. You can Google it, and you'll find thousands of clinical explanations and personal experiences. But you won't find an explanation for Emily, or for how I heard a voice so clearly during a hallucination. Some things, I've come to realize, defy explanation, and some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. I don't normally talk about what happened at 47 Cedar Street. As a rational person, I've always relied on the laws of physics and the tangibility of what can be touched, seen, or scientifically measured. But sometimes you encounter something so utterly inexplicable that your worldview shatters, leaving you groping in the dark for answers. That's what happened to me, and I've finally gathered the courage to write it down. I've always been a history buff, especially when it comes to architecture. That's why I couldn't resist the pull of 47 Cedar Street, a Victorian mansion built in the late 1800s, currently on the market for a suspiciously low price. My initial thought was that it needed some serious renovation, given its age. My second thought was that it might make a great project, a future bed and breakfast perhaps. My first visit to the mansion was with Marcus, my real estate agent. The house was grand, if a bit weathered, its wooden exterior crying out for a fresh coat of paint. Inside, the air was stuffy, filled with the odor of decay and abandonment. Marcus pointed out the high ceilings, the intricate moldings, the remnants of what was once perhaps a glorious residence. The tour was uneventful until we reached a particular room on the second floor. It was noticeably colder, and I felt a sudden chill crawl up my spine. "That's the nursery," Marcus said with a slight hesitation. "It has been sealed for years, and we don't have the key." "Why is that?" I pressed, curious. "It's just one of those old house quirks," he replied evasively. I could tell he was withholding something, but decided to let it go. After a bit more negotiating than I expected, the house was mine. The previous owners seemed almost too eager to get rid of it, which should have been my first red flag. But blinded by the thrill of restoring the mansion to its former glory, I dived into renovations. One evening, after a long day of overseeing construction, I decided to spend the night at the mansion. I'd bought a blow-up mattress and set it up in what would become the master bedroom. That's when I heard it for the first time, the soft wail of a baby. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then it happened again, a lingering cry echoing through the hallways. I grabbed a flashlight and began to explore, the sound growing louder as I approached the sealed nursery. Against my better judgment, I picked the lock and pushed the door open. The room was empty, the air thick with a cold that was almost solid. As I shined the flashlight around the room, it flickered and went out. That's when I saw them. Tiny, glowing handprints appearing on the window pane, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Then a soft, melodic lullaby filled the room, sung by a woman's voice, rich and full of sorrow. I ran out, slamming the door behind me, and spent the rest of the night in my car. The next day, I met Mrs. Simmons, an elderly neighbor who had lived next to 47 Cedar Street for decades. Reluctantly, I told her what had happened, half expecting her to laugh. Instead, her face turned ashen. "The house is haunted, dear," she said gravely. "You see, the original owners had a child who died in that nursery. The mother was so distraught she took her own life. They say her spirit is bound to that room, forever mourning her lost child." I nodded, skeptical but unnerved. Could a place hold onto tragedy, imprinting it into its very walls? I didn't believe in ghosts, but how else could I explain what I'd experienced? I could have left, put the house back on the market, and forgotten all about it. But something compelled me to stay. Perhaps it was the historian in me, yearning to uncover the truths buried within the mansion's rotting wood and peeling paint. So I made a decision. I hired a local medium, a woman named Claire, who was reputed to be the real deal. She agreed to perform a cleansing ceremony in the nursery. When Claire stepped into the room, her face went white and she gasped. "There's a powerful energy here," she said, filled with sorrow. "We have to proceed carefully." Following her instructions, we set up candles in a circle and Claire began to chant. As her voice rose, the temperature in the room dropped precipitously. My breath turned into visible mist and the candles flickered, struggling to stay lit. And then we heard it, a soft, feminine voice joining the chant. The spectral lullaby from that terrifying night filled the room, harmonizing with Claire's incantations. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting and expanding as if the house itself was alive. Suddenly, the handprints reappeared on the window, glowing brighter than before. Claire's chant reached a feverish pitch, and with a final resounding note, the handprints faded away, the temperature normalized, and an overwhelming sense of peace filled the room. Claire nodded approvingly. "She's gone, freed from her earthly binds." And she was right. From that day on, the nursery warmed up. The air lost its suffocating weight, and the rest of the renovations proceeded without incident. But I could never shake the feeling that something else still lurked in the mansion. Something older, darker, waiting for its turn to make itself known. That's why I sold the mansion, passing it on to someone else, someone perhaps better equipped to deal with whatever remained. As for me, I've relocated to a small, modern apartment with no history and no lingering spirits. But even now, as I walk through brightly lit hallways and freshly painted rooms, I sometimes hear the distant echo of a lullaby, a haunting melody that serves as a constant reminder that some pasts refuse to be forgotten. Before you go double-checking your locks and peering into dark corners, do us a little favor that won't cost you a dime but keeps our channel alive. Hit that like button if these stories sent shivers down your spine. It helps us know that we're delivering the kinds of scares you crave. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What was the most terrifying moment for you? Do you have a real-life horror story of your own? Drop your tale in the comments below, and who knows, your story might be the one that haunts our next episode. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. That way you'll never miss a chance to tremble in fear with each new story we bring to your screen. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight on Shadowy Screams TV. Remember, the next time you hear something go bump in the night, it might just be one of our stories coming to life. Until next time, sleep tight, or at least try to.